friends, welcome back. I'm really excited to kind of chat about this topic today, why UAT is not QA, because it's actually really not time sensitive, but like really, what's the word? It's like happening in my life right now. It's happening in my day job. It's also chatting with other product folks, and I had this conversation as well of like why QA and UAT are not the same thing. They are two explicit steps, and most of the time done by different people, but we'll kind of get into that a little bit, okay? So let's talk about what QA is. What QA is, it literally stands for quality assurance. And the way that I view that is it literally stands for quality assurance. And what I interpret that to mean is that it's looking at the quality of the code to make sure that it works as expected, and it's not introducing any new issues or bugs or any of those things. So like QA activities include writing test cases. So it's like very specific. Do you pass this test case? Do you not pass this test case? And that's all built off of what the cards say, whether or not you have explicit acceptance criteria or not, you can still really create some pretty decent and effective test cases. QA then will like explicitly run through all those test cases on a variety of like tools, like so they could either use do actually mobile phones. So for instance, if you have a mobile app, they can go through making sure that Apple, Android, Pixel, Samsung, all the variations, all the different sizes work. But you can also use a tool like Browserstack, which is really great because Browserstack is like an online tool that essentially emulates different sizes of mobile devices. They even do web browsers, tablets, all the things, so you don't actually have to own the physical device for you to be able to test like really thoroughly. They also go through things like regression testing, so making sure that everything that used to work, like everything that you deployed weeks, months, and years ago still works as expected, and the new code didn't introduce anything unexpected. All of those things, including down to like the micro details of form entries, making sure that for instance, if you say in the card that the name field is only supposed to accept alpha characters, maybe even not numeric characters, like literally going through all of those iterations of things, not just the happy path, but all of the edge cases. That's what QA is, right? And that's really important for like everything that I just said. Making sure things are like complete, making sure like you've actually tested it thoroughly, that we've accounted for all of the things that may come up over time, because people do weird shit. And then there's also the negative, or the like fraudsters, or the malicious people that want to inject code in the wrong places and do all types of crazy nasty things. So that's why QA is like really, really important. And for smaller companies, early stage, it's really hard to justify spending like a dedicated resource on QA, even though it's super, super important. Because like the thought is that, maybe not the thought, but like the argument against having an explicit QA team is that it slows down development, right? Because essentially, if you think about it, once a developer, let's say, spends a week developing something, then a QA person has to spend the next 2 or 3 days going through every iteration to make sure that it works. And then likely they'll find some things and they'll send it back, and like they'll repeat the cycle until there's no issues, essentially. So it's great on the quality side, but it does slow down kind of your go-to-market when you'll be able to launch things. But to me, and I'm probably sure to you as a product person, you're like, that's the trade-off that we make, so that when we launch something, we feel really good about it, that we're not introducing bugs, because every bug, every production issue, every hot fix, all of that stuff like really impacts, or could, it's not always the case, but in a lot of cases, it really does impact the trust that you're building with consumers, right? Like, how are they going to trust you with every iteration something breaks, particularly if you're doing something like really important, like moving money or saving for them, or healthcare. Like you really can't introduce things that will really have really negative side effects, right? And it's really important to do so. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about why people are against having explicit QA teams and alternatives and things like that. Okay, so QA, really clear, all the nitty gritty, making sure the code is doing what it should be doing and is taking care of all of the cases, the happy path, as well as all those edge cases. UAT, on the other hand, is an acronym for user acceptance testing. And so that's where stakeholders, product managers, founders kind of come in and functionally test the thing to make sure does it pass the sniff test? Does it as you click through this experience, as you look at it, does it make sense? Are there things that are obvious, that we didn't account for now that is actually live, and you can kind of for lack of a better phrase, like really touch it, you know? But that's all it is. It is not QA, right? It is not the same thing as QA. UAT is just that last like step, you know, as you like before you walk out the door and you just check the mirror. It's just making sure it all looks and flows properly. But it is not up to the UATers or the stakeholders to catch all of the explicit bugs or go through all of the use cases or anything like that. And in my experience, like I mentioned, particularly for early stage companies, this is where the rub is, because that needs to happen. QA as an activity needs to happen. But what you end up finding is that, again, they don't want to invest in an explicit QA team because it slows down development, because they literally just don't want to invest the money to hire someone to do this. And they just kind of more or less dump it on whoever the UATers, which tends to be the product person, right? And that doesn't work for so many reasons, but the ones that I'll talk about explicitly, outside of what I already mentioned, that QA is not UAT and vice versa, the skill sets are different, right? Like, let's talk about, like, just call a spade a spade. A stakeholder does not have the right skill set to go through as a QAer. Like, they're just completely different. There's a time investment that needs to be done in QA, again, to like document all the use cases and follow them explicitly, to do regression testing. Like, there's a reason why it's a whole ass job. It is not something that a PM should be doing, in my opinion, or a stakeholder or a CEO or any of those things. By the time it gets to those eyes, again, all of the issues, 95% of the issues should have already been found, and we should be identifying any functional UX issues, some things that we may have learned since the beginning of development that we just want to tweak slightly to make it more effective. But like, QA is not UAT. Like, I don't know how much more to say it. And when I mentioned I'm like dealing with this in my day job as well, because I brought this up, or I guess depending on what time you see this, the job that I've been working at this time, I had brought this up earlier in some discussions, and kind of use this phrase, and I don't actually know where I got this phrase from, so I can't attribute it to the right place, but if it's you, sorry, we sharing it now. But there's this argument that like, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure the code works, right? And I was like, nah, bruh, nah. Because if it's everyone's responsibility, then it's no one's responsibility. It's everyone's gonna be like, oh, well, so-and-so is gonna take care of it, or so-and-so is gonna take care of it. And it's like, literally fingers are pointing. Who was responsible at the end of the day, right? Who is the one that's gonna invest the time to make sure that all of the things work and all of the iterations and all of the edge cases? Who's gonna take that time to do it? If no one's responsible for it, then it's not going to get done. And it doesn't get done. It really doesn't. In some cases, I've been in teams where like they're waiting on product to UAT, and either we're taking too long or we have other priorities at that time, and like they'll deploy without it. And now, there's a little bit on like, yeah, product should be UATing some things, but like you can't depend on us to be doing a whole other team's job, right? QA, again, is not UAT. I'm gonna keep saying that. I might get it fake tattooed on my ass, because not literally on my ass, but you know what I mean. Okay, so how do we fix it? So if you found yourself in the state where the company is not big enough to invest in their own QA team, they're kind of depending on product to do QA instead of just UAT, like, how do you address it? First and foremost, I feel like almost all issues like this, where essentially it's like there's a problem in setting the right expectations about what we mean by these words. And I learned that really strongly this year, is that we can say the same words and mean different things. So the first thing I recommend is like having really, really explicit conversations with all the people involved. So that means engineers, engineering leads, product leads, even to the point where you might need to bring in your CEO, your founder, whomever, because you're going to need to agree on where you're going to spend the money. Because at the end of the day, it's going to take money, right? It's either going to be an explicit person that you hire for, it's going to be a tool that you spend money on to help automate some things, or if you do agree, let's say it's going to take some of your existing resources, that means that they are not going to be doing something else. So it's going to take the money that you were paying them in their salary, and now how they're shifting their time to be doing this thing that that needs to happen, right? Like, and I don't think the answer is, well, we just don't do QA. I don't think that's the answer, because again, I've been in the situations where you're constantly shipping bugs and it just slows everything down because you're constantly having to fix things and you can't actually make movement on the features that your users want. You're essentially shipping them broken things that you have to keep patching constantly. And again, that erodes trust, it erodes the morale of the team. Like, it's just not a good look, right? It's just not a good look. So have the conversations with all the people involved. Be super explicit about the activities that you feel need to happen for your product. So not every product needs to go through all of the like 25 steps, For a game, maybe there's, less regression testing that needs to happen because you refresh all the things pretty frequently. I don't know. But for something that's really important like healthcare, financial services, like explicit regression testing, explicit test cases are really, really important. And they'll also help with other things. They'll help with documentation, they'll help with customer service, because if you're documenting to that level, then you know exactly how the app should work. And anytime something changes where then all of a sudden it doesn't, right? So like it does lead to other things which I think are beneficial for the company. And maybe I'll talk about in another video, like the importance of it, even though like it kind of is boring and gross to do, but like it's super, 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 super valuable. Anyway, okay, so have explicit conversations about the activities that you feel like you need to do. Regression testing, test cases maybe, explicit documentation of what the happy path is and what the error paths could be, maybe. I don't know. But whatever those things are, talk about what they need to, what needs to happen, and then I recommend then figuring out where in the product development flow they should happen, and then determine who will do those activities. So for instance, if you're like, we need to make sure again that like anytime we change anything with money movement, we do a full regression testing, and we need to do that before it even gets to staging. I don't know, I'm making shit up. And so if that's the case, if it's before it gets to staging, because by the time we introduce staging, let's say there's a couple of other products going on that are all integrated with each other. So if we introduce like an issue with staging, it'll interrupt somebody else's team. And that's the reason why we need to do it before we get to staging. So they would do this, let's say in the development environment, doing like kind of like, maybe not a full regression, but like maybe a good heavy smoke test. And by smoke test, I mean more or less going through all of the iterations of things as well, but maybe not to like, maybe at like, 85% versus like the 99% that you would do like in production or staging or something like that. And so when you identify like where things need to happen, then I think you can talk about who can do those things. So is it a person? Is this an activity that we need to add to developers' checklist before they merge and push things to staging or production? Is this a case where we need to get automation and make that a part of like the merge process or conflict resolution? I don't know. These are the conversations that you need to have with everyone involved. There's going to be pros and cons to every decision that you make, but it's important to have the conversations and have them frank. Like, one thing I really want to hopefully impart to you is that it's much better to have really frank and honest conversations with people and hold the entire company, teams, persons accountable than to be like, let's tiptoe around this thing. I don't want to hurt their feelings, any of those things, like, because you're not really going to solve the problem if you're tiptoeing around the solution. If the answer is you need to hire somebody, or I'm going to have to spend half my day doing this thing, then like say that. just say the things, right? And not keep your mouth closed and not just absorb it, because like it's not healthy, and I feel like I'm like a robot. But so once you've identified how you want to move forward, it's a person, it's a tool, it's a something, be super explicit about it, about the roles and responsibilities. Automate as much as you can is my gift to you. And whether that's like creating a template in the Jiras, and whatever tool you use for card management, make it like a blocking indicator that if you haven't done X, Y, and Z, if for instance, like we all, the entire team agree that developers are gonna do this, that, and the third, make that a part of the card as checkoffs before it moves from lane A to lane B. Like, that's gonna really help you, because that's kind of where the details get lost, right? The devil is always in the details, where we agree to do a thing, but then we don't document how that thing is going to be done, and we're not holding ourselves accountable to how those things are going to be done. And that's where it's either going to live or it's going to die, is that accountability. So it's like, set yourself up for success as much as possible by automating, create a template, like I said, make sure that there's those gates, and it may feel like, ugh, this is just, you know, it's bringing in like that bureaucracy, that like stage gating that we hate, and we want to be agile, and we want to be nimble, and we want to be which is all, you know, it's not that. It may feel like that, but like it's not that. Like you can still be nimble, and you can still be agile, and you can still figure out, you know, what you need to develop like in real time, but like you're just enacting the quality, which is really important if it's important to you, you know? If the quality is not important to you, then like ignore this video, praise you for coming this long into the video. But like if it's important to you and your customers and to your reputation, to your brand, the quality of what you produce, then you're gonna have to invest that time. And like I said, automation will like save you. And then lastly, lean on the tools or services that will make things a lot easier for you, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. But there are tools like Browserstack, what I mentioned before, what allows you to essentially emulate the devices, all the types of devices and variations in the world. Be very clear, let's say, about the devices and OSs that you're going to code for, you know, so it's not like, oh, a person has to literally test 25 versions of everything. It's like, these are going to be the top 3 based on the, you know, let's say the data that your user are coming from and the models of the like devices that they're using. So like you're making sure like those experiences are optimized, and use feature flags. Feature flags will really help you a lot, in the sense that if you're new to what feature flags are, they're essentially a toggle in the code that either shows some feature or hides that feature from users. And so there's tools out there like Launch Darkly, like Flipper Cloud, maybe that's one, and maybe there's some other ones. They can also, your devs can also do this directly in the code itself. But yeah, so like those tools allow stakeholders in product to, you know, let's say turn on this feature in the staging environment so that they can test it out, and then slow out the roll when you get to production. So you can turn it on in production for, let's say, 10% of your population, and then once you see that it's working really well without like adverse side effects, then you can expand from 10 to 25 to 50 to 100. Like it's up to you. It gives you that flexibility. You can always turn it on for like people within your organization, so everyone gets a chance to like test things out without having to do anything by default. Like there's just a lot of options with those tools. But feature flags, Browserstack, again, there's also like QA, like automation tools out there as well. So there's a lot of options for solving this problem that's unique to your situation, to your resources, to your budget, all of those things. But like you have to start with the conversation first, because what? Yeah, exactly. QA is not UAT. It is not, and vice versa. Okay, so that's the end rant on QA. Give me your thoughts always below. I would love to hear them. I'm gonna be talking about some additional things soon, like product documentation, the connection with customer service, CS, and something that I wanna say is like unique to me and how I view product overall. So yeah, also let me know what might be interesting for you to hear about. I have some other topics, some like practical topics about like, you know, prioritization, interviewing, working with devs, all those types of things. So yeah, stay tuned. All right, until next time. Bye.